Hi everyone, Delphine here from Embody My Truth, and I wanted to share some of my thoughts on the topic of feelings, emotions, and the importance of us all knowing how to feel our feelings, which should really be, which maybe sounds very simple and obvious, but it's just such a lack in so many people that I encounter, and not just in my client work and not just in the kind of healing circles that I tend to operate in. It is really culturally such a lost art, or maybe even more something that we have never really been taught. And it makes me really sad actually, and there's a certain frustration, both in my own like personal history and in the people that I work with, that this is not recognized more. There's a lot of kind of peripheral sort of skirting around it and talking about feelings and doing things to feelings and kind of complex ways of alluding to them, but not just that very simple yet quite difficult thing of just being able to feel your feelings. So people might be seeking peak experiences of their feelings or doing all sorts of things to avoid feeling their feelings, so numbing out and disconnecting from the body. And many of us have nervous systems that have not been supported, not kind of developed in a way that allow emotions to arise in the body and kind of discharge. So there, you can be stuck in a state of hyper or hypo arousal that shows up in all sorts of kind of patterned behaviors and addictive behaviors. And there's just so many ways that feelings that are originally quite a simple thing show up in very complicated and complex and wounded ways in adult life when children have just simply not been supported to feel their feelings. And the reason they're not is because very often their parents, their caregivers, their grandparents also have not been supported to feel their feelings. So if you think about it, it's like, say, a little toddler falls in a park or like grazes their knee or gets a fright, like touches something hot in the kitchen. And then the instinct very often is to sort of scoop them up and reassure them and kiss it better and kind of make it better all really, really fast because it's so intolerable to see a little child suffering. However, this is actually kind of gaslighting in many ways. And I know that's a strong term, but it's actually very undermining of their reality in a small way, but over time can become really significant and really problematic, as we know now, many of us, because you're robbing them of the experience kind of physiologically and emotionally of being in a kind of a surprised state, getting upset, being winded, that kind of rising and peaking, and then tears flowing and a kind of a huge upset, basically processing through the experience of shock and the natural stress response, which we are actually designed to manage. So when you interrupt that kind of natural stress response, which looks different ways for different people, but originally is designed to actually help the child to kind of move through that and then, cry it out, be shocked, and then kind of catch their breath, and then it sort of comes down from the peak and then settles, and they're back in a kind of a balance, an equilibrium, homeostasis in their system, and then it's all better. But unfortunately, what happens is we can't stand holding space for that and just kind of being with them, staying connected with the child while they're freaking out. This is so overwhelming. It might seem like a small thing to an adult, but to a child, it's really shocking and painful, and their systems are not yet familiar with the fact that they can get through it. So when you can hold space for that kind of seemingly very simple experience and tolerate your own discomfort as an adult, with seeing someone else's pain, then the child moves through it. And then they move on and they run around and they play, and it's like they've forgotten about it. But when it's cut short, it stays on in their cellular memory as a kind of a, okay, so they've told me I'm better now, but my body doesn't feel like it. So it gets kind of frozen. There's a disconnect in their reality. Their lived inner experience is clashing with what their trusted, respected kind of adult caregivers are telling them, whom they rely on completely and utterly, completely reliant on others for their survival. So it's like there's an abandonment of the self then. And I remember this well myself, like even my grandmother, like I have so many memories of the particular way that she would kind of soothe us. And it would be, it's like I would get kind of scooped up and it would be like, Sifini, Sifini, Sifini. She was French, so it was like, it's all over, it's all over, it's all better now. And I'd be like, no, no, it's not. But then I was kind of loyal to her, of course, because she was the one who knew better than me. She was the one I survived on in that context, so it was like, okay, so I must be all better now. And then you just kind of repress the inner experience of kind of the shock has not metabolized through your system. And so that's a very simple example, but when it's something more serious, and there's a whole spectrum of course, life experiences. So, for example, when you're being told that you're not upset, that you're fine, or that you should be fine, that this is not an upsetting thing, even though you feel deeply upset, or that this family friend is very safe and very lovely, and you feel really edgy around them. Your little growing system is like, I don't know this person. I don't know if this person is nice to me or not. Or maybe you feel really unsafe because this person is actually really inappropriate and is doing something not okay to you. So when we're trained to override our inner impulses in those very small, like well-meaning ways, it comes from a place of care very often and of wanting the situation to all be okay and managed in families. But unfortunately, that overrides the natural stress response and the natural emotional reactions. And this happens in subtler ways as well, of course. So it's not just with kind of a shock experience or when somebody's very upset, it happens with all emotions. So in some families, it's okay for one particular emotion to be expressed, like everybody's very shouty and angry, but it's not okay to show perceived vulnerability or sensitivity or perceived weakness. And then other families do really well with crying, and crying gets attention, and being sad is kind of a way of getting connection, but actually anger is not okay to express. So it's really useful to look at your past experiences, look at how uncomfortable you are around displays of emotion from others or in yourself. Notice the physical cringe, when somebody is really upset or really angry, and notice what happens for you and get curious about it. And this, of course, means that we need to be okay with being in our bodies more. And that's the whole journey of winding back down into your body. So we get so identified with our heads when we're not allowed to feel our feelings and when we're given the signal that it's not safe to. And that the best thing to do in this situation is be okay and be all better now because everyone's moving on, or because you don't want to upset your parents and worry them. So that's another thing that we do, is when we're feeling strong feelings and that makes our caregivers, our parents, other siblings, cousins feel like they're getting stressed out that you're upset, that trumps it when you're more little. So if you see that it makes your mom more anxious or your teacher more impatient and cross that you're having feelings, they get stuff down, stuff down, stuff down. So I really just wanted to, in that very, just like highlight this very simple yet extremely important aspect of ourselves that we're being constantly denied, and we're constantly replaying that kind of same gaslighting of ourselves by saying, you're not tired, you can totally do more, you don't need connection right now, you're stronger than this. And just really, it gets so culturally reinforced that we're not allowed to have feelings, even in the way people say, oh, I was very emotional there, with some shame and judgment. Emotions are a natural part of being a human being and being in a body. So it's highly important. I'm just having a spike of emotion as a timer rings in the background there. Kind of feel the sensation of kind of an activation of, ooh, what's that? And then it subsides. But when we override, I don't know if you could hear that timer ringing, but when we override what's actually going on in our bodies, it becomes such a deeply embedded habit. And then we override our signals when we really need to be listening to them, when we're in a situation that is not okay for us. So I just want to really encourage you to find yourself in spaces and places and situations where you are with people who are okay, that you're feeling feelings, where the person that you're with is not rushing you to be kind of like over it already. You've been wallowing enough. That is also a way of avoiding feelings, is to kind of amplify them and really get lost in them. So what I'm talking about is really just presence, just sensing the emotion in your physiology. And I'll do another short video on that aspect of it. But for now, I just really wanted to name how lacking this is in our culture and how important it is for us to all be kind of rehabilitated and learn as adults this capacity that we were not properly taught as children, to simply feel our feelings as they are happening. The backlog of feelings that you weren't allowed to feel when you were little, and that weren't safe to feel, and then your feelings in the here and now as an adult. So I'll stop there for now, and I'll go into more detail on some ways that we can support ourselves to feel feelings, but really it is very simple, and there's a lot of techniques and tools. And I was reminded by a healer when I was talking about my own feelings and all the strategies that I was going to have around, like, okay, so here's what I'm going to do with my feelings, and befriending them and that's all stuff like around feelings. That's not just like being with your feelings, accompanying them, letting them bubble up, metabolize. It's actually very simple. But because we're complex creatures, we like to have strategies and have information, and we're very identified with our heads. So I will offer some little bits of guidance in my next video on how we can actually help ourselves come back to this very simple capacity and skill of feeling our feelings as they are.